What if the man who destroyed you walked back into your life and didn't even recognize your face? Not as a ghost, not as a memory that surfaces at 3 in the morning when the room is too quiet and your guard is finally down. Not as a voice on the other end of a phone call you had rehearsed answering 100 times and never actually received. But right there, in the flesh, breathing the same air, standing close enough that you could count the seconds between you, smiling at you like you were a stranger he found interesting. What would you do? Would you fall apart right there? Would the 3 years of carefully constructed calm dissolve in an instant, the way a sandcastle does when the tide finally arrives? Suddenly, completely, without mercy. Would you say his name? Would you scream it? Would you turn and walk out before the doors had even finished opening, choosing the street and the cold morning air over the unbearable reality of his presence? Or, and this is the question this story is really asking, would you smile? Maya Sinclair smiled. And that smile, that one quiet, controlled, deliberate smile in a small elevator on the first morning of a brand new chapter of her life, is where this story truly begins. Not where it started, not where it hurt the most, but where it finally became something worth watching. October in the city has a particular quality of light. It arrives at an angle, lower in the sky than summer, sharper, the kind of light that makes ordinary things look like they are being seen for the first time. It catches the glass of office buildings and turns them briefly gold. It falls across pavements still damp from the night before and makes the puddles look like something worth photographing. Maya Sinclair noticed none of this. She was walking at the pace of someone who had somewhere to be and had calculated exactly how long it would take to get there. Her leather portfolio bag was over one shoulder, her coffee was in her right hand, a flat white from the place 3 blocks from her apartment, ordered through the app so it was waiting when she arrived, because she did not have the patience for queues on a morning like this. She was wearing the charcoal blazer she had bought specifically for first days, not because she believed clothes changed outcomes, but because she believed in the psychology of preparation. And the charcoal blazer made her feel like a version of herself that was ready for anything. She had been preparing for this morning for 6 months. Not obsessively, she was too self-aware for obsession, but steadily. The way you prepare for something that matters. Researching the firm, understanding its clients, mapping its internal culture from the outside, the way a strategist maps terrain before entering it. She had spoken to 3 people who had previously worked at Ardent Group. She had read every public case study, every industry profile, every interview its senior leadership had ever given. She was ready. She was genuinely, solidly, completely ready. What she was not ready for, what no amount of research or preparation or 6 months of deliberate groundwork could have equipped her for, was the elevator. But we will get to that. First, you need to understand who Maya Sinclair actually was. Not the polished, composed woman in the charcoal blazer walking toward Ardent Group's revolving doors with her flat white and her leather portfolio. You need to understand where she came from, what she had survived, and why the smile she gave in that elevator was one of the most extraordinary things she had ever done. Because a smile is easy. Everyone knows how to smile. But smiling at the person who once broke every version of your future in a single text message, standing 18 inches away from them in a small enclosed space, and making it look like the most natural thing in the world. That is not a smile. That is a masterpiece. Maya was 32 years old. She had grown up on the east side of the city in an apartment that was always a little too warm in summer and a little too cold in winter, and always filled with the particular energy of a home held together by love and effort in equal measure. Her mother, Lynn, had worked as a medical administrator for 23 years. Long hours, modest pay, the kind of work that is genuinely important and chronically undervalued. Her father David had taught secondary school English for 30 years and believed with complete sincerity that the right story, told at the right moment, could change the direction of a person's life. Maya had inherited her mother's discipline and her father's understanding of narrative. It had made her professionally unusually good at what she did. She understood that every company was a story, not just a product or a service or a balance sheet, but a story with characters and stakes and a reason for existing that went beyond the purely transactional. Her job was to find that story and tell it in a way that made people want to be part of it. She had been doing this since she was 22, when she had shown up to her first internship in a blazer that was slightly too big and shoes that were slightly too tight, and pitched her first communication strategy to a room of senior executives who had not expected to be impressed. They had been impressed. She had known they would be. Not because she was arrogant, she was genuinely not arrogant, but because she had worked harder on that pitch than she had ever worked on anything in her life, and she had understood, even then, that preparation was the closest thing to certainty that this world offered. By 26, she was leading campaigns. By 28, she had been named in 3 industry lists of people to watch. By 29, she had been headhunted twice and turned both offers down because the timing wasn't right, and she knew herself well enough to know that she made her best decisions from a place of readiness rather than restlessness. And at 29, at a charity gala that she had attended reluctantly on behalf of her firm, standing near the bar with a glass of wine she was not particularly enjoying, she had made eye contact with a man who was standing with the same expression she suspected she was wearing, the expression of someone who would rather be almost anywhere else. And they had both, independently, found this funny. That moment, that single shared recognition across a crowded, glittering room, that is where the other story began, the one that came before this one, the one that made this one necessary. But we will get there. This is it, she thought. New chapter. She crossed the lobby, pressed the elevator button, and waited. The doors opened. She stepped in. And just as they were about to close, a hand reached in and held them. Blackhand family, before we go any further, if you are already feeling this story, drop the words "new chapter" in the comments right now. Let me know you are here with me from the very beginning. Let's go. Daniel Kwon was not supposed to be the kind of man who made her stop. She had dated before him. Thoughtfully, without desperation, the way she did most things. There had been Marcus, the architect, who was brilliant and passionate, but whose world was so entirely his own that she had sometimes felt like a visitor in it rather than a resident. There had been James, a different James, not relevant to this story, who had been genuinely kind, but with whom she had shared the particular sadness of 2 people who like each other very much and simply don't fit. She had ended both with honesty and without cruelty, and had been fine afterward, which she had always taken as a sign that the connections, though real, had not been the kind that rearrange you. Daniel rearranged her. He was Korean-American, 31 when they met, the younger of 2 brothers. His father, Raymond Kwon, had built a quiet but substantial business in commercial real estate over 30 years, the kind of business that did not make headlines, but that had shaped significant portions of the city's skyline in ways most people would never trace back to its source. His mother, Sun Yi, was a retired nurse who had raised both sons with the unshakable conviction that success without integrity was just a very elaborate kind of failure. Daniel had absorbed this. He wore it lightly, but it was there, in the way he dealt with people, in the way he talked about his work, in the way he treated everyone in a room with the same attention regardless of their title or their usefulness to him. Maya had noticed this at the gala almost before she noticed anything else about him, because she was a strategist and strategists notice behavior, and the behavior of a person when they think no one important is watching tells you more about them than anything they will ever deliberately show you. He had been kind to the catering staff. He had listened to a junior colleague ramble for 10 uninterrupted minutes without once glancing at his phone. He had laughed at something that was genuinely funny rather than performing amusement for social reasons. These were small things, but Maya had long believed that character lived in the small things. The grand gestures were easy. It was the Tuesday afternoons that told the truth. They talked for 4 hours at that gala. They missed the speeches. They forgot to eat. They stood in the corner of that room and talked about everything: their work, their families, a documentary they had both seen about deep-sea creatures that had genuinely unsettled them, the particular loneliness of being good at your job in a way that made other people assume you didn't need anything. They found each other's edges and pressed on them gently, the way you do when you are testing whether something is real. It was real. By the end of the week he had called twice, not texted, called, which she had noted. By the end of the month she had cooked for him in her apartment, which she almost never did for people she was dating, because cooking for someone is an act of disclosure, and she was careful about what she disclosed and to whom. By the end of the 3rd month she had said something honest and vulnerable and terrifying, and he had not flinched or retreated or changed the subject, but had simply looked at her and said, "I know. I feel it too." He proposed 18 months after they met. Not a performance. She had always been clear that she did not need a performance. Just the two of them on a Tuesday night. Tuesday nights, you see, always telling the truth. Sitting on the floor of her apartment eating takeout noodles because they had both worked late, and neither had the energy to go out, and it didn't matter because being in the same room was already the best part of any day. He had reached into the pocket of his jacket. The jacket he had not yet taken off because he had only been there 20 minutes, and produced a ring that was simple and perfect and entirely her, and said, "I don't want to imagine a life that doesn't have you in it." She had said yes before he finished the sentence. The noodles went cold. Neither of them noticed. The engagement was the happiest period of her life. She acknowledged this without embarrassment. Happiness is not a small thing, and she had always believed in calling things what they were. They planned the wedding together, not as a production but as a promise. Small and real, 60 people, a heritage venue with a garden, late afternoon light, flowers that looked like they had been gathered rather than arranged. His mother had cried when Maya showed her the venue. Her father had shaken Daniel's hand and said, very quietly, that he was glad. These were the moments that mattered. She had found her dress in a boutique that she passed every morning on her way to work, and had never gone into because it looked like the kind of place that required an appointment and a different kind of woman. One Saturday morning, on impulse, she had gone in. The owner, a small, precise woman named Genevieve, had taken one look at Maya and said, "I know exactly what you need." She had been right. The dress was ivory silk, clean lines, nothing fussy, nothing that would compete with the woman wearing it. Maya had stood in front of the mirror in that boutique and felt something she could only describe as recognition. Like the dress had been waiting, and she had finally arrived. "I am ready," she had thought. "I am so completely ready for this." The morning of the wedding, she was calm in a way that surprised everyone around her. Her mother kept asking if she needed anything. Her best friend Lena, brilliant, loud, fiercely loyal Lena, who had been her closest friend since university and who had wept openly at the engagement dinner, was running on the anxious energy of someone who needed to be useful and kept refilling champagne glasses that were already full. But Maya was still. She sat in the bridal suite and felt the particular peace of a woman who knows exactly where she is going and trusts the ground beneath her feet. The ceremony was set for 2 o'clock. At 1:45 she was dressed. At 1:50 she was composed. At 1:55 her phone buzzed on the dressing table. She assumed it was something sweet. A last note from Daniel. Maybe a joke. He was good at jokes at the right moment, the kind that landed because they were true and not because they were trying. She picked up the phone with the ease of someone expecting good news. The message said, "I'm sorry, I can't do this. Please don't call me. I will explain when I can. I love you. I'm so sorry." She read it once, then again, then a third time, as though the meaning might change on the third pass. It did not change. She set the phone face down on the dressing table. She stood. She smoothed the skirt of the dress that Genevieve had said was made for her. She walked to the window and looked down at the garden where 60 people who loved her were settling into white chairs with programs in their hands, and she stood there for a very long time, completely still, while the world as she had understood it quietly ceased to exist. It was Lena who came and found her. Lena who held her while she finally broke. Lena who made the calls, spoke to the guests, spoke to the venue, kept the whole collapsing thing from landing on Maya's mother until there was no choice. Lena who sat on the floor of the bridal suite in her bridesmaid dress for 3 hours afterward, saying nothing, just being there, which was the only thing that could be done. Daniel never came, never called. For weeks, nothing. For months, silence. Then, gradually, the silence became the shape of the new reality, and Maya had no choice but to build inside it. She had built well. That was the thing about Maya Sinclair. Give her rubble and she would build you a cathedral. Give her silence and she would eventually fill it with something worth saying. But it had taken time, and it had cost her more than anyone fully knew. Black and family, if this story is already doing something to your heart, subscribe right now if you haven't already. Hit that bell, because what is coming next in this story is something you do not want to walk into halfway through. Stay with me. 3 years is enough time to rebuild a life. Maya knew this because she had done it, one deliberate piece at a time, with the same methodical intention she brought to everything that mattered. The first 6 months she had taken off work. Not willingly, she was not someone who rested easily, but because her therapist, a calm and unflappable woman named Dr. Osi, had looked at her in their 3rd session and said, "Maya, you are trying to manage this like a project. It is not a project. You need to let it be what it is for a while before you can move it." Maya had argued. Dr. Osi had waited. Maya had eventually, reluctantly, agreed. So she had taken the 6 months. She had grieved in the full and ugly way that grief requires when you stop managing it. She had called her mother every evening. She had let Lena take her to terrible films and feed her increasingly elaborate meals and introduce her to a rescue dog named Biscuit, who had the remarkable quality of sitting on Maya's feet whenever she cried, which she had found, against all expectation, genuinely comforting. She had thought about Daniel constantly in those months, not with the breathless obsession of someone who could not let go, but with the unresolved ache of someone who did not have the information they needed to understand what had happened. Why was the question that lived in her the longest? Not why did you leave? She could construct 100 answers to that, none of them satisfying. But why like that? Why a text message? Why nothing afterward? Why the silence that said everything and explained nothing? She did not find the answer in those 6 months. She made peace, eventually, with not having it. She filed it in the category of things she might never understand and chose, with great effort and some ongoing resistance, not to let the unanswered question define the next chapter of her life. By month 7 she had gone back to work, not to her old firm. Walking back into that building felt like putting on clothes that no longer fit, the shape of her having changed too much for the old container. Instead, she had finally returned the call from Ardent Group, who had been headhunting her for 2 years with the patient persistence of people who knew what they wanted and were prepared to wait for it. The offer was Director of Strategic Communications. Her own team of 9. A client portfolio that covered 4 industries. Real authority, real challenge, the kind of role she had been building toward for a decade. She had accepted on a Thursday, started the following Monday, arrived in the charcoal blazer with the flat white and the leather portfolio, and the quiet, settled certainty of a woman who had survived something and emerged, not unchanged, not unscathed, but fundamentally intact. The lobby of Ardent Group was marble and purposeful light. Maya had paused just inside the revolving doors for a single breath. Not hesitation, just orientation, the way you pause at the beginning of a long journey to confirm your direction, and then crossed to the elevator bank. She pressed the call button. She took a sip of her coffee. She reviewed a note on her phone about the 9 o'clock welcome briefing. The elevator arrived. She stepped in and moved to the back. Because she always moved to the back of elevators, it was a reflex from years of taking them, creating space. The doors began to close. A hand reached in. The doors reopened. A man stepped in, jacket over his arm, coffee in hand, with the easy, unhurried manner of someone who was entirely comfortable in the world and expected the world to accommodate him, not arrogantly, just as a baseline assumption that had never been seriously challenged. Maya was looking at her phone. She registered his presence in the peripheral way you register a stranger in an enclosed space, present, noted, non-threatening, irrelevant. She returned her attention to her notes. The doors closed. He stood slightly closer than strictly necessary, not inappropriately, just with the natural ease of someone to whom proximity to other people had never been a source of anxiety. She could see him in her peripheral vision. She did not look up. First day. His voice, his actual voice, the same frequency, the same unhurried warmth, the same particular way of landing a question, not like a formality, but like he was actually curious about the answer. She looked up, and the world did something strange. It did not stop exactly. Time did not freeze in the dramatic way of films where the camera slowly circles two people and the sound drops out entirely. It was more subtle than that. It was more like the moment when you step off a pavement you have walked 100 times and find, unexpectedly, that the ground is lower than you remembered. That brief, vertiginous rearrangement before your body recalibrates. Daniel Kwan was standing 18 inches away from her, looking exactly like himself, not like the version of him she had constructed in her mind over 3 years, slightly distorted by grief and anger and the distance of time, sharpened in some places and softened in others by the unreliable editing of memory, exactly like himself, the same face, the same eyes, dark, direct, with that quality of genuine attention that had first caught her notice at a gala 4 years ago. The same easy posture. He was wearing a charcoal suit, good quality, worn with the slight carelessness of someone who dressed well without thinking about it. And he was holding his coffee, and he was looking at her with the open, warm, uncomplicated interest of a man who had just seen a woman who had caught his attention. He did not know her. The recognition was completely, entirely absent. Maya had imagined seeing him again many times in the first year. She had imagined it in grocery stores and restaurants and on street corners. She had run the scenarios, what she would say, how she would feel, whether she would be able to be in the same space as him without everything she had rebuilt cracking at the seams. She had worked on those scenarios in therapy until they had lost their power to destabilize her, until the imagined version of the encounter was something she could hold without flinching. She had not imagined this. She had not imagined that he simply would not recognize her. Something happened inside her in that moment that she would spend a long time afterward trying to accurately name. It was not the pain she had expected. It was not the anger she had kept in reserve for exactly this eventuality. It was something colder and more interesting than either of those things. It was the sudden, crystalline recognition of leverage she had not known she possessed. He was looking at her like she was a fascinating stranger. She could be a fascinating stranger. She could stand in this elevator and smile and tell him nothing and walk into this building and do her job and let the truth find him in its own time, on her terms, at a pace entirely controlled by her. She did not have to hand him the moment. She did not have to perform a reunion she hadn't prepared for in a space 6 feet wide with nowhere to go. All of this moved through her in approximately 1.5 seconds. She let the silence sit for 1 beat longer than was comfortable, just long enough to remind herself that she was the one choosing what happened next. Then she smiled, even, warm, entirely composed. "First day," she said. The elevator arrived at its floor. The doors opened. She walked out first without looking back, with the steady, unhurried stride of a woman who knew exactly where she was going. Behind her, she heard the elevator doors close. She took 1 breath. Then she kept walking. Before this next part, Black Hand family, I need to hear from you. If you were Maya in that elevator and you recognized him, would you have said something right there? Or would you have done exactly what she did and said nothing? Drop your answer in the comments. This is going to get very interesting. The welcome briefing was held in a conference room on the 14th floor, with a view of the city that Maya noted and filed away as something she would eventually stop noticing, the way you eventually stop noticing all the beautiful things that become part of your daily landscape. There were 4 other new starters at the briefing, and Maya spent the first several minutes quietly assessing them, not competitively, just informationally. A young analyst named Tobias, who asked very precise questions and wrote everything down. A mid-level finance hire named Grace, who had the easy confidence of someone making a lateral move and knew it. 2 others whose names she noted and whose portfolios she would look up later. Patricia, the HR director, ran the briefing with the brisk efficiency of someone who had delivered this exact session many times and had refined it to its essential components: benefits, systems access, building protocols, the internal structure, who led what, who reported to whom, which teams intersected, and how. You will each be paired with a senior stakeholder from a connected department for your first month, Patricia said, advancing to a new slide. This is about integration, understanding how your role connects to the broader business before you're fully embedded in your own team. Maya was listening. She was also watching the slides. Maya, you will be working most closely with the head of business development. He oversees all client relationships that intersect with your communications portfolio, so the alignment between your 2 departments is significant. You'll be joining his Monday briefings from next week. The slide loaded. A professional headshot, clean background, navy suit. A direct, confident expression that Maya knew, that she had studied, had held in her hands, had woken up to on Sunday mornings in the pale, early light of her apartment, with an intimacy that Patricia and everyone else in this room could not begin to imagine. Underneath the photograph, Daniel Kwan, head of business development, Ardent Group, 2 years. Maya's coffee cup was halfway to her mouth. It stayed there. She did not put it down. She did not shift in her seat. She did not allow a single muscle in her face to move in a direction that was not already planned. 32 years of self-discipline and 6 months of therapy and 3 years of rebuilding had all been preparation for exactly this. The moment when something completely unexpected lands in your field of vision, and you have approximately 2 seconds to decide how you are going to respond. She decided to respond by taking a perfectly normal sip of her coffee. "He's exceptional," Patricia was saying, in a voice that was now reaching Maya from a slight distance, the way voices do when your internal processing is consuming a significant percentage of your available attention. 2 years with us, built some of our most important client relationships from the ground up. The clients love him. You 2 are going to produce excellent work together. Maya set her cup down. "Looking forward to it," she said, in the voice of someone who was entirely looking forward to it. Tobias, to her left, asked a question about the onboarding timeline. Patricia answered it. The briefing moved on, and Maya sat with the information settling into her like cold water, clarifying, shocking, and ultimately, strangely, not unwelcome. She had 4 days before the Monday briefing. She used them well. She met her team, 9 people, various levels, a good mix of experience and energy. And she was warm and direct, and asked good questions, and listened carefully to the answers. She reviewed the current client portfolio. She identified 3 areas where she believed the communication strategy could be significantly strengthened. She began drafting a 90-day plan. She did all of this with the focused efficiency of someone operating at full capacity. She also, in the margins of this efficiency, spent a certain amount of time managing the particular ongoing project of being in the same building as Daniel Kwon without anyone, most importantly, Daniel Kwon, knowing that it was anything other than a normal professional situation. She passed him twice in corridors. Both times she gave the same professional nod she gave everyone. Both times he smiled back, once with recognition from the elevator, once with the easy warmth of a senior colleague acknowledging a newer one. Both times she kept moving. She called Lena on Thursday evening and reported this. "He smiled at you." Lena said, "He smiles at everyone, it's his thing." "Maya, I know. Are you okay?" Maya considered this question honestly, which she always tried to do. "I think so. It's strange. It's very strange. But I think I have more control over this situation than I expected to have, and that helps." "What kind of control?" "He doesn't know who I am, which means I get to decide when and how he finds out, which means I am not reacting to something, I am choosing something, and I am much better at choosing than reacting." Lena was quiet for a moment. Then, "You know that's either the healthiest thing I've ever heard, or a very eloquent way of describing a trap you're setting for yourself." "Possibly both," Maya said. The Monday briefing was sharp. Daniel ran it with the ease of someone who had done this many times and enjoyed doing it, prepared, decisive, with a fluency in the client relationships that told Maya he had built them carefully and maintained them with genuine attention rather than just performance. She had expected competence. She had not entirely anticipated how naturally they would communicate. They were frictionlessly compatible. It was the professional equivalent of a language you thought you had forgotten, finding its way back into your mouth, fully formed. The rhythm was familiar, the shorthand arrived instinctively, the gaps in each other's thinking filled in without effort. She found this deeply inconvenient. After the briefing, he caught up with her in the corridor. "The elevator," he said, falling into step beside her. "I realized I never got your name." "Maya Sinclair," she said, "Director of Strategic Communications." "Daniel Kwon." He extended his hand. "Welcome to Ardent. I think we're going to work well together." She shook his hand. His hand was exactly as she remembered it. The particular architecture of it, the warmth, the firmness. She had held this hand in airports, in hospital waiting rooms, at a kitchen table at 2 a.m. solving a problem together, the way people do when they are so comfortable with each other that the hours stop registering. "I think so too," she said, and walked away. Behind her, she could feel him standing in the corridor, curious, still unable to locate the source of the familiarity she clearly generated in him, still without the information he needed. Good, she thought. Let him sit with the not knowing for a while. I know what that feels like. The second week was harder than the first. Not dramatically. There was no single moment that broke through her composure, no crisis she had to manage. It was subtler than that, the way the hardest things usually are. It was the accumulation of small moments that each, individually, she could handle, and that together were beginning to require more maintenance than she had anticipated. There was the afternoon she walked past the coffee machine and found him there, making 2 cups, and he handed one to her without asking how she took it. Black, no sugar. And she realized he had noticed. Not because he remembered, because he was someone who paid attention. He had always been someone who paid attention. This had once been one of her favorite things about him. There was the Wednesday meeting where they disagreed about the framing of a client brief. Genuinely disagreed, with equal force and equal evidence, and she had felt the specific pleasure of arguing with someone who argued well, who engaged with the substance rather than the position, who changed his view when the evidence required it and held his ground when it didn't. She had forgotten what that felt like. There was the Thursday afternoon when she was alone in the conference room at 7 in the evening, deep in a presentation that wasn't landing, and she heard footsteps and looked up to find him in the doorway with 2 coffees from the machine in the corridor, holding one out with an expression that was uncertain in a way she had almost never seen on him. "You've been in here for 3 hours," he said. "I noticed the light." She looked at the coffee. She looked at him. "Thank you," she said, and took it. He did not leave. She did not ask him to. He sat across the table and looked at the presentation and said after a moment, "The 3rd slide is doing too much. Strip it back. Let the data carry the argument." She looked at the 3rd slide. He was completely right. They worked in silence for 23 minutes. She had counted afterward. 23 minutes in a quiet office at 7 in the evening, side by side over a presentation for a client neither of them had met. And it had felt with a kind of terrible naturalness, like every Sunday morning she had ever spent on her couch trading work stories with him while the coffee went cold. She had left the building that evening and stood on the pavement outside and called Lena and said, "I need you to remind me of everything." Lena had begun immediately, in considerable detail. It had helped. Mostly. The quarterly company lunch was held on the top floor, in a private dining room that looked out over the city in all directions. It was informal, which meant it required a different kind of management. Unstructured social time was always more demanding than meetings, because meetings had agendas, and agendas created a scaffolding you could operate inside. Maya moved through the room with practiced ease. She was warm with people she had met, and curious with people she hadn't. She asked good questions and gave genuine answers and laughed when things were funny, and did not perform laughter when they weren't. By the midpoint of the lunch, she had spoken to 11 people, gathered 4 pieces of useful information about the internal culture, and eaten approximately half a bread roll. She was in conversation with a senior partner named Edward, a thoughtful, dry-humored man who had been with the firm for 18 years and who was telling her something genuinely interesting about the early history of the company, when she became aware, in the particular peripheral way she had developed over the past 3 weeks, that something across the room had shifted. She continued the conversation with Edward. She kept her attention on his face. And through her peripheral vision she tracked Daniel, across the room, near the window, in conversation with 2 colleagues, going still in the particular way of someone receiving unexpected information. She did not look directly at him. She let Edward finish his thought. She responded. She excused herself graciously and moved 3 steps to the left, angle shifting, and through the crowd she saw Daniel's face. He was staring at her, not with the warm professional interest of the past 3 weeks, with the expression of a man watching the floor rearrange itself under his feet. Someone had said her name, her full name, Maya Sinclair, in a context that had provided enough surrounding detail for the connection to finally close. She could see the moment of recognition moving across his face like weather. The confusion first, then the recalibration, then something rawer and less manageable underneath. He knew. She held his gaze for exactly 2 seconds, long enough to confirm that, yes, she saw him seeing her, and no, she was not going to look away first. And then she turned back to the room and continued circulating. She felt him cross toward her. She finished her current conversation and moved toward the windows before he arrived. Not fleeing, just choosing the ground. "Maya." His voice had changed entirely. The professional ease was gone. What remained was something unguarded that she had only ever heard from him in private. She turned. He looked like a man who had been moving at speed and had stopped very suddenly. There was no composure left. His eyes, always the most honest part of him, she had said this on the third date and meant it, were full of something she was not ready to name. "You knew," he said. "Since the elevator. You knew the whole time." "Yes," she said. "Why didn't you?" "Because I am here to do a job, and this is not the place, and I am not ready." Each sentence was separate and deliberate. "We are professionals. We work together. That is the beginning and end of it right now." She left him at the window and walked out of the room. For a moment neither of them moved. Then Maya stepped in. She pressed the ground floor button. The doors closed. The elevator began to descend. "I need to tell you something." His voice was stripped of everything professional. "And I know you don't want to hear it here. And I know you have been very clear about what this is and what it isn't, and I respect that. I respect you. But I have been carrying this for 3 years, and I have been carrying it differently since the elevator, and I cannot keep working 20 feet away from you without you knowing the truth." The elevator reached the ground floor. The doors opened. Neither of them got out. After a moment, the doors closed again, and it began to ascend. She said nothing. She was listening. "The morning of the wedding," he said, "my brother James came to see me at the venue." She had not expected James. James, who had given the speech at the engagement dinner that made her father cry. James, who had hugged her at the rehearsal dinner and said he was glad Daniel had finally found someone worth the effort. He had been managing something for years, something to do with my father's business, legal exposure that went back a long time. He had been containing it, but it had broken open, and the people involved, Maya, if we had been married that morning, your name would have been attached to it, your professional reputation, everything you had built, everything you were going to build. I would have put you directly in the path of something that could have dismantled your entire career before it reached its peak. The elevator hummed around them. I had 40 minutes. I could not think clearly about anything except getting you out of it. I made a catastrophic decision in a moment of panic, and I know. I know what it looked like. I know what it cost you. There is not a single day in 3 years that I haven't— "Stop," she said. Quietly. He stopped. The silence between them was the most complex silence she had ever stood inside. "You could have told me," she said. "You could have said, Daniel, something has happened. I need time. I am so sorry." Those 6 words would have been enough for me to hold on to. Instead, you sent a text message and then disappeared for 3 years while I had to explain to 60 people who loved me why the wedding wasn't happening, and I didn't even have a reason to give them because I didn't have one myself. I know. I am not asking you to know. I am asking you to understand that the how of it mattered as much as the why. And the how of it was cruel, Daniel. Not intentionally, but it was. He looked at her with the full weight of that, and did not flinch from it. "Yes," he said, "it was, and I am sorry in a way that I do not have adequate language for." The elevator reached the ground floor. The doors opened. Maya stepped out. At the lobby door she paused. "I'm going to need time," she said without turning around. "I don't know how much, but I'm going to need it." She pushed through the door and walked into the October evening. Inside, Daniel stood in the open elevator doorway, watching until she disappeared into the city, holding the door with one hand, and the door kept trying to close. And he kept holding it, long after she was gone. Maya did not forgive Daniel that night. She was too honest with herself to dress understanding up as forgiveness. She understood more now, the shape of the reason, the panic behind the decision, the genuinely protective impulse at its center, and understanding was not nothing. But understanding a reason and forgiving its consequences were two entirely separate acts, and she had never been someone who collapsed the distance between them for the sake of feeling better sooner. She sat with it. She thought about it carefully, in the mornings before the building filled, in the evenings over the presentations she still took home, in the small hours when sleep moved just out of reach, and the mind did what minds do in the dark, turning things over and over until they either broke or revealed their actual shape. She thought about a man in a venue with 40 minutes and no good options, and a fear so specific and so large that it had overwhelmed everything else, including his judgment, including his decency, including the basic human instinct to simply reach for the person you love and tell them what is happening. She thought about how fear could make even a good person do a terrible thing. She had seen this before, in other people's lives, in the stories her father had told, in the clean, hard truth of human psychology that she had spent enough time studying to know it was not an excuse, but was at least an explanation. An explanation was not nothing. She kept coming back to that. She talked to Lena. Obviously, she talked to Dr. Osi, whom she had returned to for 3 sessions since Daniel had appeared in her elevator. Not because she was falling apart, but because she was wise enough to know that this was exactly the kind of situation that benefited from external clarity. Dr. Osi had said, "The question is not whether his reason was good enough. The question is what you want, going forward with full information. That is a different question, and it is yours to answer at your own pace." Maya had written this down. She had written it on a small piece of paper and folded it and put it in the front pocket of her portfolio, which she took everywhere. She did not know what to do with it yet. She knew it was important. There is something this story has been building toward that is not the reunion, and is not the revelation, and is not even the confession in a small, humming elevator between floors. It has been building toward a woman standing in the ruins of a life she had planned, and choosing, not once but daily, through 3 years of consecutive ordinary mornings, to build something better from them. Not because someone told her to, not because it was easy, or because she had fully healed, or because the grief was ever completely finished, but because the alternative was to let one person's catastrophic decision become the defining event of her life. And she had refused, quietly, without performance, without the need for anyone to witness or validate the refusal. She had simply refused. That is the kind of strength that does not announce itself. It does not stand at the front of a room and make a speech. It does not require an audience. It lives in the private decisions, the morning you go back to therapy when you could instead spend the hour in bed. The week you accept the job offer when fear is telling you the timing isn't right. The elevator when you could fall apart, and instead you smile, not to be brave, not to perform composure, but because you have genuinely, finally arrived somewhere solid enough to stand. Maya Sinclair was a woman who had arrived somewhere solid. Whatever came next, whatever she decided about Daniel, whatever they built or did not build, whatever the future held in the particular and unpredictable way that futures do, she was going to face it from that solid ground. Not from fear, not from the wound, from herself as she had become. Fully, deliberately, expensively herself. And sometimes, as her father had always said, and as she was increasingly inclined to believe, the right story told at the right moment can change the direction of a person's life. She was beginning to think that this story, hers, the one she was living, was going to be one of those. She does not know that James did not come to Daniel that morning out of panic. She does not know that James came with a plan. She does not know that the legal situation, the one Daniel, described in the elevator, the exposure that threatened to reach her name, her reputation, everything she had built, did not disappear after the wedding was called off. It went quiet. And quiet is not the same as resolved. Quiet means someone made a decision that it should not surface. Quiet means someone had the power to make that decision and chose to use it. And quiet means that somewhere, at some point, a price was agreed upon for that silence. The price is about to come due. She does not know that there is a person, someone neither she nor Daniel has encountered yet in this story, who has been watching both of them from a careful distance for a very long time. Someone who knows exactly who Maya is. Someone who knew before she ever walked into the Ardent Group building. Someone who watched her accept the offer, start the job, step into the elevator, shake Daniel's hand in the corridor, and deliver the first briefing. And said nothing, and waited, because they were waiting for exactly the right moment. Someone who has reasons of their own for wanting Maya and Daniel in the same place. She does not know any of this. She is standing at her office window watching the October light change over the city, thinking about an explanation that might be enough and a future that is not yet written. And she feels, for the first time in 3 years, something that is cautiously, tentatively close to hope. And in the lobby below, in the lobby of the building she has just begun to think of as hers, the elevator doors open. A figure steps out. We do not see the face. We see only the way the lobby staff, who know everyone in this building, go very still. We see only the way the figure moves, with the ease of someone who has been in this building before. Who knows exactly where they are going? Who is going up? Episode 1 ends here. But the story is only beginning. Black Hand family, you made it to the end of episode 1 and I see you. I feel you. Drop I need episode 2 in the comments right now so I know you are ready. If this story moved you, if Maya's strength, her composure, that smile in the elevator gave you something today, share this with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe if you haven't already and hit that notification bell so episode 2 finds you the moment it drops. Because the figure in that lobby, the price that is about to come due, the truth about James and what he has really been protecting? Black Hand family, you are not ready. But we are going to face it together. See you in episode 2.